This raises some very interesting questions on the development of one of the Islanders' top prospects, as it has been revealed that they will not be attending training camp. We're going to discuss it on this episode of Islanders Digest and also talk about an injury scare that one of their other prospects experienced. And it is really good to know that this will not be a long-term concern for the Islanders. Really dodged a bullet, as especially when it comes to prospects, an injury can be so detrimental to their development. First, let's talk about the news that Victor Eklund will not be attending training camp for the Islanders. I know for a lot of Islander fans, this was pretty disappointing, especially after he signed his entry-level contract. There was some expectation that he would be in training camp for the Islanders, and while I did not think Victor Eklund was going to make the Islanders, I am not completely delusional when it comes to Islanders prospects. I can't even imagine the last time a 16th overall pick made the team the first year that they were drafted. If he did make the team, it would be a huge mistake for every other team in the NHL. But still, it was disappointing just because we want to see a first glimpse of what he can do against professional players. But we're going to discuss that decision in just a moment. I think it makes a lot of sense. Really quickly, before we dive into that, we are on our way to 2,000 subscribers. Thank you all of you who have already subscribed to support this channel. If you're an Islander fan, you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Be sure to join this Islanders community, and let's really focus on this decision by Victor Eklund, why he made it, and why I do think it is the right decision, even if I really did want to see Victor Eklund. I'll admit, when he signed his entry-level contract, I was under the assumption that he would be doing training camp with the Islanders, but the more that I think of it, and now that I really understand the SHL schedule, because while I do know a little bit about different players in the SHL, I really didn't know when the season started, and it makes sense considering that the season is starting before the NHL season, that he is going to just go through training camp with his team for the SHL. Remember, his team just got promoted. It is a really good club, and Victor Eklund is going to have to prove himself to really get full-time minutes in the SHL, which is something that is very important that he does. And I'm really going to talk about, when it comes to Victor Eklund, the concern if he does not earn those minutes right away. Sometimes in these leagues, it can be a little difficult for a young player who's been drafted to the NHL to get traction in the lineup. As the club knows, long-term, that player is going to be leaving to play in the NHL. And as a result, it can lead them to favor other players instead. And this is definitely a concern I've had with Victor Eklund. And as a result, it makes a lot of sense for him to go right into the season with the SHL and not miss potentially 6 games with his club, which could have likely had a player gaining more favor with the club and given him even more obstacles to overcome. I have really little doubt when it comes to Victor Eklund and his talents. I think he translates very well to the pro game. I think he's one of the better players on his team. But even this year, at times, he struggled to earn minutes just out of trust with his coaches. And this is definitely something that is interesting and I am going to keep an eye on. I don't think it's really too much of a concern. Again, the Islanders also think this is the right decision for his development. I think the SHL is the perfect place for Eklund to play. I think jumping up another level in competition, then also playing on a smaller rink size, which is what the AHL will be, would be too much of a transition. And while I do think Eklund would be able to handle it, playing in the SHL does make a ton of sense for his development. But I do have concerns that if he does not get that time on ice, which he is looking to get, which is why he's been working this summer to build up more muscle. It's why he is not attending the World Junior Championship summer showtime, which we're going to discuss a little more later in this video, as we got some, at first, an injury scare, but we got reassured that an Islanders prospect was not majorly injured. But going back to Eklund, I think he's doing everything right, and I think he is going to crack a top 6 role in this lineup. But I'm really curious to see what happens if he doesn't, because Victor Eklund is at a point in his career where playing top 6 minutes is going to be very important for his development. And when it comes to these foreign teams, sometimes that does not happen. The NHL doesn't really have control over things like this. And this is one of the main advantages about the CHL. We're constantly talking about how it's better for these players to play against higher competition, and generally I do think it's true. But one advantage that the CHL has above other leagues is your top prospect is going to be getting that top minutes that they need to develop. You don't really have to worry about that. Sure, it's against lesser competition, but for a player like Victor Eklund, that can be reassuring. Although I do think this is the right decision, it is something to keep an eye out. And if he doesn't get that time, which again, this is early, I have little doubt that he is not going to get an increased role. Again, he scored 19 goals last season. He was a huge part of this team having a good season. I expect him to have a bigger role now that they move up into the SHL. But it is just something to consider and to really monitor as the season goes on, especially if Eklund does not get off to a hot start. Apologize. Now, speaking about prospects, there was a bit of an injury concern for the New York Islanders yesterday, and I am very glad that nothing came of this. First, I was going through Twitter the other day, and I saw that Schaefer was sent home, and I absolutely panicked. There's nothing wrong with Schaefer at all. They sent him home because he made the World Junior team for Canada, the under-20 team, last season. So really, he had nothing to prove after having him for one game where he looked good, although he didn't put up any points. Was very impressed with how he looked in the clips that I saw. Good to see him in game action. Remember, when it comes to Schaefer, he has not played in a 5-on-5 game since he was injured in December. So just that ice time is huge for him. Nothing went wrong with Schaefer. However, Kashawn Aitcheson did take a pretty nasty hit from behind. He left his game for Canada. Good news is today he appears to be back in the lineup for Team Canada, so he's avoided injury. It seems like this was something very precautionary. And now the big question with Aitcheson is he going to be able to crack this lineup? Because I think playing World Junior 20 champions for Kashawn Aitcheson would be a huge opportunity for him to improve his development. What I love about these under 20 tournaments, I know this is where Schaefer got injured last season. Don't want to see anything like that again, but this is the best chance for a lot of these players to really play with higher competition, especially these CHL players. We're talking about these prospects, and we complain they're not playing against the top competition that players like, for example, Victor Eklund is playing against. This is an opportunity to play with the best players your age that are in the world. And I really don't know if Kashawn Aitcheson is going to make this team. I think it really depends on who makes the NHL from who was on the team last season. I think if players like Schaefer are on the Islanders, Kashawn Aitcheson has a much better chance of cracking this lineup. And I really hope he does, because I think this would be a huge opportunity for him to grow. In addition, now that we know Aitcheson is okay, I'm really hoping that he does decide to play in college. I think that is the best role for him. But again, when we're talking about this thing, the other thing you have to factor in is in college, he's not going to be guaranteed power play minutes, which is something you definitely have to consider when we're talking about where these players should play. I think with a player like Schaefer, it's a no-brainer. Wherever he plays, he's going to be on the power play. Realistically, if he's on the Islanders, there's a pretty decent chance he's going to be on the second power play. But with other prospects that aren't as high status as those guys, you can go to college and then end up getting second or even third pair minutes. College, and professional sports, it's all about winning. The SHL is not going to put extra effort into developing a player like Victor Eklund, because especially unlike the NHL, Victor Eklund is not their prospect. He is the Islanders' prospect. So unless he's performing right away, then he's going to be moved down the lineup, which is why it's interesting when it comes to where these players play. And it's not like the AHL where it's a professional league, but the focus is also developing. But with the SHL, the focus is winning. And the same goes for the NCAA, even though there is a little more focus on developing players. So we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not concerned at all when it comes to Victor Eklund's development, because I think he is that player. I think he's going to prove himself. He's going to be a valuable part of this team. But it's just something to consider, and it's definitely things that teams have had to overcome with the SHL and other leagues in the past. It seems to be a bigger issue when it comes to the KHL. That's definitely something worth noting when we're discussing where we want these players to play. But let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Where do you think Kashawn Aitcheson should play next season? I'm still on the college boat, although I still could see the CHL route. I just feel, especially with his physicality, one, somebody's just going to get hurt with Aitcheson playing in those games, and two, I just don't know how much more he has to develop. at least on the physical side. In terms of his power play and his playmaking, maybe it makes sense for him to play another year in the CHL. Absolutely dominate. Love to know your thoughts on that in the comments below. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm your host, Patrick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Catch you in the next video. Let's go, Islanders.